All right. So welcome. One of the first things that we're going to do for our picture tonight is to paint the entire canvas black. So one of the things that I had mentioned is that if you wanted to start with a black canvas, you could. If you don't have a black canvas, no worries. Just go ahead and grab some black paint and one of your bigger brushes. And we'll just take like 5 minutes just to kind of paint that whole background black. Now, if you don't want to use black, you can always use like a dark blue. You could do like a dark purple. We just want a really kind of dark, contrasting background for tonight's inspiration. And you could use something like totally different. Like a dark blue would be really moody, maybe a dark orange, or not dark orange, like a dark green. So you don't always have to do black for like these dark contrasting backgrounds. You can kind of think outside the box where you might feel comfortable. But when you're painting the canvas black, you can just do nice, smooth, horizontal brush strokes. Just pick a direction and just stick with it. Try not to do like vertical brush strokes and horizontal brush strokes. It will just look really messy. So we'll just take a minute to paint the canvas black. And I'm using, this paint I'm using isn't like the highest quality. I think this is like I don't know if it's like a Blick. It might be like it's like a Michael's, normal kind of paint. It might be a Blick. Yeah, it might be a Blick, but it's not like the thickest black. So based on the quality of your paint, it may not be like totally blocked out in color per se. So just don't worry about it too much. Just know we're going to put a lot of elements on top of this. And if you want to bring in some blues into your black or some greens into your black, you could definitely do that. Like that could be kind of fun. I wonder if I could bring any greens into this. That could look kind of neat. I'm already thinking outside the box. So this is just the background. Yeah, let's do a little phthalo green. Let's have a little fun here. So one of the things is like you can always, let's do a little dab of green here and here and here and here and here and here. Let's just see what happens. Just take a little bit of black and play with it with a little bit of the green. It's okay to experiment. Just paint and we'll dry. And it's still nice and dark in color. So this is art at its best, right? It's just kind of, hey, I have an idea. Let's give it a try. And I love, you guys know I love being courageous in these classes, just showing you, hey, if you have an idea and it's a low risk thing that you're not gonna, you don't think you're gonna knock yourself for, just go and try it. Because if I didn't like this green, I could always paint black over that, right? But I have a little bit of green coming through the black, which is kind of fun. It might be just a little bit of an extra accent to the glowing forest I'm going to put on top of this, which is kind of fun. Ooh, if you have any glow in the dark paint, you could always put glow in the dark paint on like a dark canvas like this too. That's always fun. Maybe we'll do a glow in the dark class sometime. Folks want to do that. You'd have to buy the glow in the dark paint, but that could be kind of fun. That works great. Some more neon and bright colors. But the dark greens are kind of fun. You can see it's shiny. It's because it's still wet. So we're just going to take a few minutes here. I'm buzzing through this pretty quickly. But we're painting the entire background, any kind of darker colors that you want. I added some green, which is kind of fun. And then we want it to dry. So I'm moving this paint around pretty smoothly. And don't hesitate to be in charge here. Put a little pressure on your brush. Move it around left and right. Can't mess up this step, I promise. Just stick with your horizontal brush strokes and everything will be fine. Fill in all those nooks and crannies. I'm not using any water here because I want it to be pretty dark in color. Sometimes we use water, sometimes in the backgrounds when it's a lighter background to kind of create a little bit of opacity. but I'm not doing that today intentionally because I would like this to be nice and dark in color. And in some areas it's a little lighter, but it's just because of the amount of paint I have in one spot or another. Look how fun that green is. Super funky. And you can always, I added a little green. Can add a little bit more. I just did a little dab. I'll bring this down so you can see. This is the bottom. I'm just doing like a little dab of the green here and there. If you don't have this green, don't worry, but it's called Phthalo green. I call it like my emerald green. If anybody's ever gotten a kit for me, I have 2 typical green paints that I keep in stock because I mail paint kits all over the country for teams. And I keep a phthalo green in stock, and I have a lighter green. The lighter green I usually send is it's like a grass green color. But this phthalo green is so vibrant, and I love using it where we can. And if anybody ever wants to try this color, you can certainly buy it online, or if you ever want to, if you ever need paints, I'm happy to send you paints as well. So don't ever hesitate to ask if you need supplies or have questions on supplies. Love this. So I'm just making sure the background is filled in, but I'm going to let this dry, ladies and gents. So for anyone who's watching the recording, definitely reach out with any questions, but this is going to dry for a minute. And I'm just going to rinse my brush, and you can see I'm painting on acrylic paper tonight, but you can see the green's really fun, really funky. You can see it's kind of textured. It's kind of neat for like a woodlands background. And I did drop the painting inspiration in the chat window. So if anybody wants to take a peek at that, you can see what we're painting. But I do want this to dry before we draw on top of it. And I'm going to do a little bit of fanning here to dry my canvas. It shouldn't take too long. But I love the composition for tonight because there's so many different elements for you to consider. And if you're ever, looking to get inspired, you can always, Google woodland scenes, or if you wanted to bring in an animal or a snail, or, there's a small moon in the sky. There's so many things you could bring into this. So I'm going to give everybody like 4 solid minutes. If you haven't stopped painting yet, grab something. We want our canvases to dry. You can see mine's already drying. Some of this shininess is already processing quite nicely. I'm using a canvas to fan it, which is working pretty well. You could use a book. But don't hesitate to, if you want to go take a minute to make a cup of tea, heat up some water, grab a cup of water for yourself. Staying hydrated is more important than ever these days. A conversation I have with my mother quite often, who does not like water, God help me. But Mom, you need to drink water. So funny. The conversations we have with family members. All right. So as this is drying, I will be using a pencil tonight to do a little bit of sketching. And I may not sketch everything. I may just sketch like a little bit of mushroom placement. It really depends on like what you have in mind for tonight. If it's helpful for you to do like a lot of the sketching and then you maybe fill it in with your teeny brushes, you can. So feel free to use the chat window to let me know, or unmute yourself and you tell me, hey, Megan, I'm going to sketch everything, or I just want to sketch the mushroom. Let me know what you're thinking tonight so I can support you and your ideas. Sharon, what do you think?
I think it might be helpful actually to talk through how to do some of the
greens.
The greens, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So I agree. I think since they're so tall and thin, to sketch them may give everyone a little more confidence on how to shape them and like how to hold some of the black space behind. I agree. And then there's a couple bell flowers. There's a couple tall mushrooms. And then if folks want to, it's doing pretty good. If folks want to do that little butterfly on top, I think that would be really helpful. So thank you. I do agree. I am going to give everybody's canvas two full more minutes to dry, just to be polite. So I'll wait until 7:15 just to make sure that everybody's is dry, even though mine dried, unless everybody's is dry. So feel free to use the chat. But I'll give everyone 2 more minutes just to be polite to get their canvases dry. And you can see mine isn't shiny anymore. Not really. I mean, it's a little, I mean, some spots, it's like probably a little sticky, but we're doing okay. We're doing all right. Here comes Miss Dory. And I have a pencil handy. Hey, Dory, welcome to the party. And I'm sure she's joining and getting set up. So for Dory, who just joined, we're painting our canvases black, or I did like a black and green to kind of get started. Or you may have a black canvas at home. You're welcome to use a black canvas, or you just start with a dark surface. So just join us, Dory, when you have a dark surface ready. So we're gonna do a little bit of sketching. And tonight's class is being recorded. So if anyone has to leave early, or if you have any questions, do not hesitate to do what you need to do for yourself. Okay. And I will repost the inspiration into the chat window so Miss Dory can see that as well. Okay. So you can all see the orientation that I chose for tonight was landscape or portrait, which is vertical. You can always, flip this around if you wanted to do it landscape. It doesn't matter. So the orientation tonight, you can kind of pick and choose what you want. But we'll start with some of the main focal objects of our picture tonight. And that is, we'll do the big mushroom. So there's a big mushroom here. And again, you all know that I love to use my hands to figure out how tall something may be or whatnot. So most of the greens are going to go right down to the bottom. So right down to here, we'll leave a little bit of space for this dark black and green to show. So we'll kind of start up a little higher, but we're going to find where we want our big mushroom to be. And from a placement perspective, the mushroom is going to be on the right, and I'm going to have a smaller mushroom kind of on the left. So I want you to figure out where you want the top of your mushroom to be. I kind of want it not directly in the middle, but over a little bit. And this is where you get to determine how the scale of your scene is, right? You could do lots of tiny little mushrooms, and you could do a big moon in the sky, right? So there's a lot of different scale options that you can do for tonight's picture. Also, if you're going to be putting a butterfly on top of your mushroom, you can leave a little space on top of your mushroom. So I haven't decided on the butterfly yet, but I'm going to do a mushroom here. And I'm just going to do a little bit of a dot here on where I want the top of the mushroom to be. And I'm just going to draw the mushroom cap. Just going to be brave. And it's going to kind of be rounded at the top. And it's going to be like a little rain hat, maybe. It's going to come out and it's going to be rounded on the bottom. It's like a little rain hat. Imagine Paddington the bear wearing a little rain hat. That's one way of drawing a mushroom, right? And then maybe the stem of the mushroom bends to the right and kind of comes down to the left. And the top of the mushroom is a little skinnier, and then the bottom and the base of the mushroom is a little bigger. So that's a pretty wavy mushroom. If you don't want your mushroom to be that wavy, which I can totally fix this too. That was a little psychedelic here of my mushroom shape here for a Friday night. I can reshape this so it comes down just a little straighter. There we go. So that's why pencil's nice. And once your canvas is dry, you can erase, look at that, right on top of your picture. So pencils are always handy to have in these classes. So always bring one if you can. And I kind of made the bottom a little bigger. So I want you to be happy with that mushroom. And I'm going to put another one down here, just a little kind of a baby mushroom, rounded on the bottom. And then maybe, you know, at the neck of the mushroom, it's a little more narrow. And then as I go down, it can get a little wider. So these guys are kind of hanging out in the middle area. And then we're going to kind of put some greens and some flowers kind of coming up around the edges. So I'm going to do a little bit of this intentional sketching and just go at your own pace. You can kind of change the shape of your mushrooms. If you want them to be have a little bit more of a dip, you can change your mushrooms to have a little bit more of a dip. And when you paint these, you can always change the shapes too. So I think I'm happy enough with these for right now. I have a big one and I have a little one. And then we're going to do a little bit of a leafy kind of vine kind of coming up here. And it's just going to go kind of just above the top of the mushroom over here. But I'm going to start at the bottom and I'm going to do a line kind of coming up. You can give it a little bit of swagger. This is like the middle of the stem of the greenery. So I just did a line coming up and I'm keeping space, black space at the top of the page. I'm being very intentional about that. So I might bring this down just a little bit. But this is a forest. Things are growing, things are moving. So you don't need to do straight lines if you don't want to. You can add a little bit of movement. And then maybe at the top of this line, if you want to do some specific sketching, you can draw like a little flower bud up here, maybe like a 1, 2, 3, if you want to get a little creative. And then we're going to draw little leaves. So if you would like to do little leaves to fill in with a small brush, you can. So this is what Susan was, not Susan, Sharon was talking about. It's like, if we could just take a few minutes to just do a little sketching, some of these small details. You can figure out how big you want your leaves to be, how dainty you may want these leaves to be. Play with this, ladies and gents. And I'm using just a regular pencil, and we're going to fill this in kind of like a coloring book tonight. So it's going to be really fun and easy kind of painting this in. But this is where we're doing a little drawing, a little more drawing in advance. And some of you may not want to be, you don't have to do this drawing. If you just want to start painting, you just go at your own speed here. You can figure out how many leaves you may want to add. I may want to add some more leaves. I can just tuck in some smaller leaves if I want to tuck in some smaller leaves, right? So you can decide how much space is in between these. If there's any questions, don't hesitate to ask, but you can either sketch this with me with a pencil. And I'll probably stop my leaves right here. And we'll do the same thing on the other side. We're going to do it's like we're framing our mushrooms in the middle with these long green. I'm going to make these beautiful, bright, brilliant green, these pretty little flowers and veins or vines coming on the side. So we're going to do the same thing on the left side. So I'm going to, again, the line is going to start down here. You can see how this one's kind of started under here. I'm going to come under my left little mushroom. And I'm going to come up and over. And this one can come a little higher maybe. And I'm hugging the side pretty closely. And you can add another little flower, maybe a 1, 2, 3. I added like a little 1, 2, 3 to the top of that one. And I'm just going to do the same pattern of leaves on this one over here.
Thank you so much. Oh, wow. Wow.
All right. So just take your time. Again, if you wanted to paint these leaves and not draw them, you don't have to draw them, but sometimes taking a few minutes to kind of play with what you want your picture to be. A lot of artists sketch what they want to do beforehand. It depends what vision they have. And imagine, you know, you do a landscape scene or you do a flower scene, and then they'll do some really, you know, faint lines to identify the structure. And that's really what we're doing tonight, because it allows the artist to pay more attention to color, figuring out what they want their base colors to be, all those things. How many more maybe little petals do I want? So it's really based on the vision of the artist, on how much sketching they do in advance. And I think it's good for us to talk through that, because sometimes in these classes we make time to do sketching in advance, and sometimes we don't. Sometimes we just start painting. And there's no right way or wrong way of doing things. It's just really based on personal preference. But it's just another great principle of how art is such an individual thing, right? That everyone can kind of do things in their own way. But in these classes, we kind of get to play with all the different ways of doing things, so you can figure out what you like to do the best. And if anyone has identified a preference, like, we'd love to hear that. It's always fun hearing like what works for you. Always love hearing everyone's perspectives and what you've learned about yourself as an artist, all those things. It's always so much fun. Okay, so I have some fun greenery gonna happen here. I may add one more on the left. So I have my pencil. I'm gonna add one more kind of close by here. So I'm just gonna kind of come up, and it's gonna come up about halfway, I think. So I'm gonna add one more, maybe with a little flower on the top. You don't have to do this. I'm being fun for Friday here. I'm gonna add some more of these cute little petals. And you could do like long petals. You could do little small petals, ladies and gents, tucked in. That's adding some texture, adding some variation to the plants that we're creating. Right? See how it makes it look a little more natural by not having just the same petal in the same place. You can tuck in a little one here or there. And I love this already. We haven't even used any paint yet here. What a fun little scene. But look at the inspiration and consider what else you may want to add in to your drawing. And if you're already painting, no problem. You have the option to not sketch all of this if you don't want to. But there's like lots of kind of lines and vines down here. So if you wanted to add a couple of additional like lines to kind of ground the bottom, you could add a couple of lines. We're going to use the green paint to go over each of these lines. So keep that in mind. And for me, I may just get started here. If there's other elements you want to add, feel free. There's a couple other like tall, skinny mushrooms. Maybe I'll just tuck in one of those, or maybe two. We'll just see how it goes here. They're kind of, I'm going to put them in, you got to have open space to do it. So I have a little bit of open space here. And there's like these tall, lean mushrooms, kind of like the tall mushroom caps. Maybe I'll just do two of them just so you can see what they are. There's two mushroom caps right there. And then these are long and skinny stems. So it's going to kind of wind down, maybe behind this one. It's like a long, skinny, and it's going to stay skinny the whole way. Long, skinny mushroom. Again, if you don't want to add these guys, you don't have to. I was just kind of being fun. And these I'll make a different color, so they'll stand out. So if you wanted to add any of those long, skinny mushrooms, you can. But we can get started here with painting, and then we can, we'll fill in additional details as needed, okay? But you can see the composition of the picture. If you wanted to come up here and do like a little moon, You could do like a little crescent moon in the sky. It's the worst moon I think I've ever drawn, ladies and gents here. So just fix your moon. It's a little skinnier here. If you want to do a round full moon, you could do that too. So I'll paint that white. Okay. And I can do little white dots for stars if I wanted to. Okay. Are folks interested in the butterfly on top of the mushroom? Give me a thumbs up. Sharon, I think is okay. So the butterfly, you can sketch that if you want to. It kind of has like one, you can kind of start it on the top. It kind of comes off with like one rounded part, bigger rounded part, and then one smaller. So it's kind of like a heart, but it's like a bigger side and then a smaller side. And then you can give it like a little body on the left. And then you're just going to give it like a double wing on the left. So it's just like a little butterfly on top. And you can play with that. The wing, the back wing can be a little smaller. It can kind of come off a little bit. If you just want it to be like resting on top of the mushroom, you can kind of play with how much of the butterfly is touching. But it's kind of just like a tilted heart is the easiest way to do that. But I love this. We have a scene that we are ready to paint, which is so fun. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. So let's start with those mushrooms. If folks need to take more time to play with your sketching, feel free, but we're just going to jump right in. So I'm going to do red and white for the mushroom first. So whenever you paint on dark background, if you're not using like a super high quality paint, you will likely need to mix like a little bit of white with your red or mix like a little bit of white with your green. So for me, I have red on my plate and I have a little bit of white I'm going to put on as well. So I have my plate right here. I have red and I'm just going to put some white on my plate. And I'm going to mix just like a light red color. The white will help kind of stand out on top of the canvas. So you can put a healthy amount of white on your plate if you need to. And then you want to find some small brushes for like a lot of our next steps. So, I mean, for this big mushroom, you can use like a medium-sized brush, nothing too small if you don't want to. Whatever brush you're most comfortable with, feel free to grab. I have this like medium-sized flat tip brush. This will work pretty good. You could also use that bigger brush too. And I'm just going to take a little bit of the red and a little bit of the white, and I'm just going to mix them kind of in between. And just make enough just to kind of do, so you can kind of cover that first mushroom. My first big mushroom is going to be red. You can pick and choose your colors along the way. My second mushroom is going to be orange, just for awareness. And I'm just going to paint in this first mushroom. So satisfying. You will likely need 2 coats, so just put it on so it's not too goopy. I kind of like doing the edges first. You're going to see brush strokes, don't worry. We're going to be doing like a lot of first coats on things and coming back through. So embrace the process of painting something once, kind of moving on and coming back to it. And the less, if the paint isn't too wet or thick as you apply it, it will dry more quickly. So I'm just getting good coverage. I see brush strokes, which is fine. Don't worry if you see brush strokes. And go at your own pace. If you're still sketching or if you started painting something else, don't worry. You can paint anything you want based on your own order. And if you want to use different colors than I'm using, that's totally fine. You can use whatever colors wherever you want to tonight. So my mushroom is like a pink color. It's going to dry. I'll make it more red, I promise. And I'm going to let it dry before I do a second coat. So this is where I've painted one coat and I'm going to make an orange now using this pinky color, I'm gonna add a little bit of yellow. I'm gonna paint this little mushroom right here orange. So I'm just gonna take, maybe I'll take a little bit of my red, make an orange, and I'm gonna add a little bit of white, because again, the white will help cover up the black background. So whenever you paint on a darker background, it will take a little longer to complete your art because you have to do a couple coats, but it's all right. So make an orange, add a little white to it. You have a lot of paint on here, kind of move it around so it's not too wet. You can use whatever size brush you wish. So that's my, it's like an orangey peach color right now. I'm gonna let it dry. And we're gonna come back to these colors, okay? But I'm gonna clean my brush and I'm gonna let those two dry. And I'm gonna go to the greens next. So we're gonna bounce around, go at your own pace. We're gonna do first coats everywhere first, and then we're gonna go back through and do second coats, okay? That will give each of the areas the opportunity to dry. So I have a pinkish red mushroom, one coat drying. I have an orange mushroom, orangish white mushroom drying. They're both very light in color. We're gonna add a second coat. They'll be much more definitive and bright in color. So we're just giving this as our first pass. In our next step, we're gonna mix a green of our choice. So if you happen to have a Failio at home, use this with a little bit of white. If you don't have a Failio and you have a green, use a green. If you don't have a green paint, you can use yellow and mix a little blue to make a green. Now to make a green, it's a little touch of blue, goes a long way. But if you want it to be a little more bluish green color, you can add a little bit more blue. That makes sense. And I want you to find a small brush of choice. If anyone has brushes for me, there's gold numbers on the sides of these brushes. I'm using a number 2, but just use a small brush that you're going to be in control. So if you want really dainty greenery, use a really dainty brush. But I'm just going to take a minute to add a little white and this green. And this is just a first color. I can always change the color or add a secondary color to this greenery. I might add like a lime green accent to some of this green to really make it pop, but we could do that after. So I'm just finding this comes out to be like a nice light teal, and a nice light teal will stand out on this dark background. So always in these classes, just take a couple minutes, as much time as you need to find colors that you like, right? Mix them together. It's where I love slowing us down. You've all had a long week. I'm sure some of you are using this to relax and unwind. I'm so glad you're here, as always. And I'm spinning and doing a little paint management on this brush to say, is this brush the right size for my vines, for my greenery? And I may want a smaller brush, but maybe just start down at the bottom and say, let's just see if this brush is a good one or not. And just, we're going to outline that line first. Now I have to ask myself, is this line too big or too small, right? And I could go smaller, but I'm just going to try to be really gentle and dainty with my hand. I'm painting a little softer, so this line is as small as possible. And you can see how nice that teal shows up on the black. So you're going to basically take your time. I use my pinky on my dominant hand for stability, and we're going to just outline the primary stem. And this is where we're going to slow down. You can start at the top, you can start at the bottom. If your color is different than mine, which it probably is, don't worry. It's totally fine. This could be any color. I'm going to make it a little bit more lime green as a second coat, which will be really fun. And then you can start to paint in all of these fun little leaves. You can do the outline of the leaves. Maybe leave the blacks. The center is a little open if you need to use a smaller brush here. I love this part. It's nice and relaxing. You don't have to fill them in. You could just outline them and then maybe use like a lighter color as like an accent. So there's a lot of different things you can do. I'm just outlining the lines that I had drawn. Now, some of you may have already painted these. So everybody just kind of go at your own pace. If anybody wants to get a little fancy on me, you can grab a little bit of yellow and like bring in a second color if you want to along the way. If you want to put a little bit of yellow in here to make it like a greenish yellow. Look at that. This is where you can get a little funky. I put a little yellow on the inside of these. So kind of embrace your position tonight. I always love mixing colors and doing different things to inspire you, but just do what you're comfortable with. You don't always have to use one color when you paint something. You can bring in different colors at the same time, which is kind of fun, but you just have to be open to it, really. So I could put a little bit of the yellow. It's kind of mixing to give me that lime green. So I'm kind of doing a 2-in-1 here, which you can see the fun colors kind of coming through. Let's see, there we go. So just take your time. We're going to just work on some of this greenery on both sides. If you want to bring in a second color along the way, feel free, but I'm just outlining these and just popping a little bit of a second color on the interior just to have some fun. I'll bring that a little closer so you can see it. So your artwork, be creative, fill in this greenery as you wish. You can always bring in this secondary color after too if you want to. So just go at your own pace. Go back and get some more paint. Do the paint management. Say, hey, do I want a smaller brush? Or am I happy with what I'm using? I'm using using just a tip of this brush, being really careful of like having some nice pointy leaves, playing with the angle and the movement of each of these leaves. They're not all straight. Some are a little skinny. You can even pop in a couple of little smaller leaves, like a little dab here or there along the way, like a little bud. So just be open-minded on how you kind of fill out this green space. And of course, if anyone has any questions along the way, please do not hesitate to ask. And I am going to try to keep these lines nice and thin. I added some extra green vines down here, just like overlapping one another, just to kind of tie it together visually. We're going to add some additional green in here, but this is just to really ground the bottom of the picture. So these are kind of like intertwining a little bit with the same greens on this left side. So this is all optional, but you can kind of see where we're going here. See how they kind of connected? So visually, it's all going to kind of connect like a big U kind of with these greens. And if you want to come in, look, I'll show you all what I'm doing. I have a little bit of yellow. I'm mixing with this teal. Look at this. It's kind of like this green color. And I could put a little bit of that on the tip of my brush and just give it a little bit of extra color and pop. If you want to, on the middle of some of these leaves. I could definitely be using a smaller brush. I'm okay for right now, but you can, it's just a fun way to add a little bit of extra brightness as we go. And if you've taken these classes before, you know that the more layering and the more detail you add, the more your picture is going to kind of come to life. So that's like a fun starting place for some of that greenery. But I'm going to rinse and repeat for my 2 green vines over here on the left. And I'm going to do a little paint management. Again, I'm making sure there's not too much or too little paint. Oh, good. Dory is here with friends. Good. There we go. I'm just making sure I'm managing how much paint is on here. Dory, that's right. I forgot I saw you last week with your friends painting in the same room. I recognized you. Imagine that. All right. So I'm just going to use a nice steady hand, a nice thin line. It's hard to get the thin lines. I feel like that's what a lot of people struggle with, is kind of finding the right brush with the right width. You don't need it to be thin if you don't want to. I'm just doing that standard kind of core green line. Oh, except if you do me, you do a nice smudge in the middle. It's okay. I'll turn that into a flower or something. All right. I'm just filling in this. I'm going down nice and slow. My pinky is balancing on the canvas. I'm dragging my pinky right along as I was outlining that. So sometimes you come up with your own tips and tricks based on how steady your hand is, or most of the time it's how not steady your hand is. And I'm going to go in and paint those leaves that I drew with this. And this paintbrush is working for me. I could be using 100% a smaller brush, but I'm just being delicate with using a few of the bristles only on top. I'm also going to create a little awareness of some of these leaves are smaller, some are bigger. So look at yours. Some of you might have the same uniform style leaves, size-wise, going all the way down. Add in a couple smaller ones along the way. Change the shape of some of these leaves. You can see some of these have a little bend, some are a little wider, some are a little smaller. That variation in size will make your picture look more realistic. Now I'm resisting from grabbing a smaller brush. I don't know why. I probably should, but I'm just using the edge of this one. Probably grab a smaller brush here in a minute. I'm being very careful with a flat edge, and sometimes it's just about making a choice to grab a smaller brush. So I'm just going to grab a smaller brush. We all fight with our choices sometimes, you know? All right, so I grabbed a smaller one. I'm just going to continue to go about my day here. Let's see if this one works any better. Oh, yes. Smaller brushes for the win. Again, I'm just doing outlining for these petals. And then if I get a little creative, I can take some of my green, my lime green, and kind of fill it in some of these areas as a fun way of adding some dimension, a little bit of lightness to these petals. We can do more of this after, but filling in these petals any way you want is part of the game here. Right? So we have a little patience. This is where we spent some time drawing. Again, some of you may not have drawn, you may have just painted. So wherever you're at, just feel free to bop around and fill in first coats of these objects. Take a deep breath, enjoy this time. Again, I'm so glad you're here with us. And we will do a group kind of show and tell once we're done some of these base objects. We could easily paint for 2 hours tonight. So if you and your friends or you by yourself would like to do that, you're welcome to. I'm going to try to keep tonight's class to hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes, just to be mindful of time. But we're doing good. But there's just so many details we could, I'm sure you could imagine we could just keep going and going. And I'm just going to move on to the second stem here. A little bit. Again, if you want to bring in secondary colors at any time to some of these leaves, you can. I have a little bit of a greenish yellow. I'm just doing a little touch on some of these vines. Greenery. And I have little flowers at the top of some of these green things. I'm going to use color on that after. I'm just focusing on what paint I have on my brush, staying focused. But don't hesitate to tuck in little leaves along the way, along with some of your normal size. Again, it adds a little variation. Don't forget to smile. You're having fun. If you're painting with someone, look at the person to your left and say, you're doing a great job. If you have your cat, just make sure they're not walking in your paints, Sharon. Make sure you smile. These are the things. These are the little things that you're making time for yourself, which is so important. All right. So I'm working on these greens. I'm going to fill them in with a secondary color. You can figure out if you want to add any more greens or not. I am not at this point. I may add some after, but I'm just kind of keeping with what I have. I could make this a very complex painting and really make it into a jungle, but it would probably take me like 4 hours to paint. So sometimes, based on how long our classes are, we have to make choices of how much detail we add. The nice thing is that you're all at home, or you all have your own supplies, so you can continue to work on these after tonight's class. But that's just some fun detail. If you want to, maybe we'll do, let's see. I'll do some light pink for these long skinny mushrooms here, like a light pink purplish color for these long skinny ones. And then the mushroom stems are going to be like a light orange. So if you want to use like a light orange to paint the mushroom stems, maybe I'll do the light orange for the mushroom stems first, just because I have orange right here. So this is orange and white mixed together, kind of like a peach colored stem. They could be pure white if you wanted them to, but I'm just making them a little orangey. So I'm just going to paint these mushroom stems so they stand right out. Again, first coats, we're going to come back to our mushrooms. The upper necks of the mushrooms are a little skinnier. Sometimes they don't stay so skinny, so don't kick yourself if they're not perfect, doesn't matter. But you can fill in these mushrooms. They get a little bit bigger towards the bottom. And just fill these in. This is kind of like a white peachy color, the mushroom. And if you decide your mushroom stems are too thick, you can always make them thinner. So with like a darker black or a darker green, right? So don't kick yourself, just do a base coat. And if you need to reshape your mushroom stem, I could always make this a little skinnier, but we're okay for right now. It's always good. You can always start a little more thin and then you can make it bigger. So just keep that in mind as you're filling these in. And you can always do a second coat on these mushroom stems. These are for the primary mushrooms. They did pretty good. You can kind of do a quick second coat, but I'm going to let them dry. I'll be a little patient there. And I'm going to make a like a purplish pink for these tall skinny ones in the background, because hey, why not? And to make a purple, or pink, or purple rather, you use a little bit of blue and red and white mixed together. So again, you can pick and choose what colors you want things to be. I'm going for the colorful flavor for a Friday night here of mixing a little red and a little blue to make a purple. And I'll add white to this so it stands out a little bit. But just mix your own colors. You have the choices, right, of what colors you use and where. This is actually a purple in real life. There we go. I do want this to be a little lighter, so I'm just going to grab a little scoop of my white and just bring that in here. And if you want it to be a little more pinky, just bring a little bit more of the red in. So again, it's so much fun playing with color if you allow yourself to play with color. And I always try to talk through that in these classes because, gosh, when you find a color you like, you get really excited about it. Like a reddish purple. Like we don't do reddish purples that often in these classes. Let's make this a reddish purple, right? So you can choose. I added some white in here. It's like a light purple, but we're okay. But I'm going to paint these little mushrooms here, these tall skinny ones, as like a light purple color. Kind of taller, more narrow. And I'm going to do a really smooth, thin line. Oh, I love this color. I might use this purple color for one of the flowers on top of my green. So that's where you use continuous colors so everything matches. I love this purple. It's so pretty. I'm gonna do the next one and it's gonna dry. We'll probably do a second coat, so no big deal. Nice rounded top. And this mushroom's going behind the other one. Kind of fun. Okay. Now I love this purple because I'm going to do some like little purple flowers over here somewhere and I'll connect it with some greens. But one of the things we do in these classes is we like to use a single color in lots of areas to tie everything together. So I love this color purple so much. I'm going to put in some tiny purple flowers. I'm just going to do little dots of 5 over here, like little, and this is just me. They're kind of like little holly berries. And these are going to be little flowers I'm going to connect. So this is me imagining and having fun for a Friday night. Very exciting. So these are little flowers, but they match the purple over here. I'm just doing a little clusters of 3, maybe like a 1 and 2. You can see how they're kind of coming up from my forest floor. I'll get some green and I'll connect these to my vine somehow, but this is just thinking outside the box of saying, hey, I love this purple from these mushrooms. I'm going to tie it in over here. And then guess what? I'm going to put a little purple flower over here on the top of this green stem. See how I just put a little purple flower? So they're all matching. I have a little purple flower up here. I have purple mushrooms and purple little dots down here. All these colors will start to tie together. You could even use this purple, again, throwing ideas out there. You could use this for the back side of the wing of the butterfly too, because it's a darker color back here. So pick and choose where you can continue to use a given color for everything to match and come together. So that's the kind of the back side of the butterfly. The front side, I'll do like a nice light color, but you can kind of see where we're going here. I'm going to give these mushrooms a second coat since they're almost dry already. And a second coat will really bring something to life. Really give it a lot of, it'll make it look more substantial. This is where you can really just follow your heart in regards to what you want to work on and work on next. I'm going to get a little green to connect these floating little flowers I just did, cleaning my brush. Sometimes it's good to wipe the water off your brush with a little bit of a paper towel to make sure you don't get, nothing gets too drippy, right? So you can kind of wipe off some of the water with your paper towel. I'm going to grab some of this green. Going to use this to connect these little flowers to the earth. And they can come down straight, they can come down any way that you want. And if you didn't want to add these, you don't have to. This is just me being imaginative and just showing you a way of bringing in additional elements. But look how cute those are. Just little dots, created little flower clusters. We could get fancy too. We could do like little white dots with the purple dots. We'll talk about that though in like a half an hour. Okay. So I'm going to look around and say, well, what else? Do I want to add any more? Am I happy with my green leaves? Do I want to make any more modifications there? So do I have to, since I have green on my brush, do I want to add any more funky, brighter colors? So I'm just going to maybe put a little bit of yellow or put a little bit of the lighter green on these leaves. What other colors do I want to put on the top of my flowers? I got two more flowers. Here, I have a little flower here and a little flower here. Maybe I'll do an orange flower over here to match this orange mushroom. See what I'm doing there? Thinking outside the box of matching colors. So maybe I'll do an orange flower up here to match this orange mushroom that I'll paint. So this is kind of, everything will match and kind of tie, you're being conscious to tie colors together. So I'm going to use this light orange. This is kind of like an exotic tulip I've created here for my mushroom forest. I love a good lotus, so maybe I'll open it up like a lotus. There, just I turned it from a tulip to a little wildflower. And then maybe this flower will be red like my mushroom, right? So see what I'm doing with my colors here? So I'm starting to create this color palette of reds, oranges, purples, and greens for my picture tonight. So think about what your color palette is and where you can tie in some of your similar colors in your picture. So I'm going to take this pink color from my mushroom and I'm going to put it on this flower over here. So that matches. I'll let it dry and we'll come back and add some more. I'm just going to have some fun. Give this a base coat. Maybe we'll do the white moon in the sky, right? We'll paint our butterfly. And then we'll do a first round of a show and tell. So everybody can see where our base colors are at in about 5 minutes or so. I'll keep an eye on the clock. We're at 8:01. So at 8:05, 8:06, we'll do a first show and tell so we can all see everybody's. But try to get all your base objects with a single color. Some of you may already have all that done. Some of you may not. There's no race. I'm going to grab a little bit of white for my moon. If you need to downsize to a smaller brush, feel free. If you want to put stars in your sky, feel free. I'm going to do a white moon so it stands out. If you don't like your moon, guess what? You can paint right over it. Paint black right over it once it dries and fix it. I'm just embracing my moon for what it wants to be tonight. Try not to be too judgmental. It's hard sometimes. We're really hard on ourselves most days. And I always remind us, like, we are good enough, we're doing our best, and we're having fun, right? That's the best we can do. We should be happy with that. Some days are harder than others, but we just do our best. All right. My moon keeps getting bigger. Nobody knows what that's like. All right. So I have the most crooked moon on the planet tonight. Guess what? No one's perfect. I'm gonna try to round it out a little bit. There we go. It's a little bit better. And I'm going to use the round end of my brush. I'm going to clean off the tip of this. I'm going to use the round end. And I'll make a little water wash first. So if anybody wants to do any fun stars with me, I'm going to take a couple of dollops of water. My water is green, by the way. It's okay. I'm going to take a couple dollops of water and I'm going to take a little scoop of white paint and I'm going to make a white water wash. And this is going to give me like a light opacity of a white color. See how it's like milky? And you can use the tip of your brush or you can use the round end. It doesn't matter. And I'm just going to use, I'm going to hold my brush straight up and down and I'm going to hold it close and I'm just going to do little tiny taps. And this is going to allow me to put in little stars in the sky. So you can use this water effect if you want. It's a little fluid. See how I did little tiny stars? I'm like barely touching. If you want to do like a little bit of a galactic sky, you can, if it's watery, you can kind of pull the bristles back and you could do a little splatter if you want to. A little splatter. I'll show you what it looks like up close. Splatter's a little messier. So you could also use like the round end of your brush too to do little dots. But I'm just adding a few stars in the sky. Any way that you want to do that, feel free. But you can do clusters of 1 and 2. But the stars in the sky are so cute. It's awesome contrast with the dark colors. You can do it just in the middle area near the moon. You can extend it kind of over here a little bit. But this is just a really fun way of bringing your picture to life. If you want to add like stars or constellations, you can. I love this. So you can make this as pixie and dreamy or as jungle as you wish. I'm not going to do too much down here in between my mushrooms, but just did a couple dots down there. Primarily, I'm going to stay up higher on the picture. Oh, and don't smudge that like I did. All right. So I'm going to be mindful. I'm not going to add too many. Okay, I'm going to stop. Megan, put the brush down. Put the brush down. All right. I am not happy with my moon yet, but I'm just going to look at it. We're going to have a little conversation here and I'm going to let it dry. I'm going to come back to it. Sometimes you just need to let your objects know who's boss. Okay. I'm going to paint my butterfly white on this wing here. If you don't want it to be white, you could pick like a light yellow. So I could do a light yellow. That could be pretty. So on this big wing of the butterfly, you do like a light yellow. You want it to be fairly light in color. You could do like any kind of light color is fine. So the wing behind the butterfly is going to be darker. I did like a purple wing for my purple mushroom. Butterfly is really cute. We're over our 5-minute work here, but we had to get all these basic details in first. Our basic coats, that was our first step here before our show and tell. We'll do our show and tell once we're done our butterfly here. Some of you are probably ahead of me, but I'm just taking my time tonight. I think many of you like to take your time too, so some of you might be right here with me. All right. So my butterfly is going to dry. It's just kind of like a little white heart, tilted heart with a little purple wing behind. And I have basic coats down. This is so fun. I'm going to unpin myself and I'm going to go to the gallery view of Zoom. And I'm going to take a look at each of you and see how you're doing. We always get inspired by seeing one another's work. So even though you may, if you feel like it may not be finished or you're not done a certain area, I would encourage you to share if you are open to it. So no rush, but let's check everybody's out. Nice, Sharon. Look at that butterfly. It's so dainty right on top. Oh, Terry. I love Terry. She already went for all the details on the underside. Terry, you have a cute little scene there. Nice. Terry did a lot of underlining already and some detailed work. I love that. Amazing. Thank you for sharing, ladies. So we are doing all these base coats first. So then we can add our second coats of color where we need it. And the second coats of color where we need it are like making the mushroom actually red, right? Not like this washy color. Making our second mushroom orange. And then we can add the spots of the mushroom on top of that. And then add in more layers of green where we may want it, right? So we can make this as lush of a scene or as simple of a scene as we wish, right? So that's how our painting is going to evolve tonight. Okay. So I'm going to go back and pin myself. If anyone has any questions or needs anything or has any commentary, do not hesitate to ask. But I'm going to jump in and paint my red mushroom red. Now that this is dry. So find a brush that you're comfortable with. You could use the big one. You could use a medium size. I'm going to go back to that medium size. And I'm just going to grab my red. And let's just see what red looks like right on top of this. That works. So I'm just doing like cherry red right on top. You could easily do 2 coats of red for the top of this mushroom. I'll let you make the choice on where you add multiple coats. Where we just have a little patience. This red paint for me is not the highest quality. I'm not using any of my Reeve paints tonight. If I was using my Reeve paints tonight, which are a higher quality paint, I'd probably be fine with 1 coat of red. But we all have different paints that we use. So just know that in these classes. Some things may take you a little longer, or you may have better coverage than someone else. So I think it's like it's really creating just acknowledging that your experience with your paints may be different than someone else. So that's 1 coat of red. For me, I need another coat, right? You can still see it coming through. No big deal. I'm going to acknowledge that. And I'm going to come down here and make an orange for my second mushroom. So it's just kind of saying, yep, I'm going to do another coat. No problem. Because I have a lot of other things I can keep painting while that dries, right? So it's the bopping around. It's a very formal art term, bopping around. Letting one thing dry, coming back to it. And orange is probably in the same case, right? Getting a couple coats of orange. But I love this orange. Oranges and greens and purples are like the most beautiful complementary colors from one another. And I'm so glad. So consider what colors you're using. So do I want to add any other colors or any other details to this picture? I'll show you this orange. It's really pretty. The light that I'm using tonight is pretty bright right here. Let me see if I can turn this off. Yeah, you can't really see it that well. There we go. It's a little bit better. I need it to be darker in here. Let me see if I turn the light off, see if I can change my coloring at all on my picture. That's a little bit better. Lighting is fun, isn't it? All right, there we go. So you can see a little bit more of the richness. So there is my orange and there's my red. I'm gonna do 2 coats of those. I'm gonna put a little bit of this orange. I'm gonna get a smaller brush and bring some of this orange from this mushroom up to this orange flower. So it's kind of just going back and saying, Where do I need second coats of things to tie colors together? And hey, do I want to put orange anywhere else, right? So those are all the fun things you can kind of ask yourself as you're playing with your artwork tonight. Ooh, do I want to put orange anywhere else? Maybe. Let's see. So that's a fun bit of orange there. Maybe I'll tuck in. This is where I get a little crazy on Fridays, you know. Maybe I'll tuck in a little bit of like some orange little dotted flowers down here. So this is me just having fun. Again, this is this orange is, I'm going to mix a little bit of white with it. Just doing little dots for little clusters of flowers. You could do little spirals too. So if I grabbed, let me see what tiny brushes I have here. So there's lots of different shapes that you can add in. So I'm just gonna I'm doing little dots. You don't need to do this, but this is just me being fun and creative. You could also tuck in flowers on some of these greens too. So if I want to tuck in a couple of these small little dots on some of these greens down here, I could. I'm just adding more layers of color. And then once these orange ones dry, I can add some green to them to kind of connect them to this chain of earth here. Okay, so I'm going to let those orange flowers dry. I think I'm good with my oranges per se for right now. Then I look at, okay, what color is next? What do I want to add next? Well, I have these purples. So let's see, where do I want to add a secondary kind of purple tone to any of these purples or do a second coat? Now, one thing that could look really cool for my purples is mixing a lighter purple color to add as a brighter object. So see how there's lighter colors, like the lighter stems and the lighter butterfly and the lighter moon. I could take this purple color and mix a lighter tone of the purple to bring some of these purple objects to life. And if you've taken my classes before, this is just right along with the depth techniques that we do. It's about making a lighter color to create a little bit of that brightness. So I'm just taking a little bit of this purple, making a lighter tone of it. And I might, I don't know, maybe I'll add little white dots on these mushrooms, little light purple dots. Maybe I'll do a line on the underside of these mushrooms, like a little smiley face with little white dots, like little light purple dots, right? So see that? It just brought those to life. Just a little bit with a lighter purple. So I used this base purple and I mixed just a little bit of white with it. I could do little light purple dots on the inside of some of these light purple flowers. So this dotting technique will just give these a little bit of extra depth and dimension. I'll bring that a little closer. So it's just playing with secondary colors where you wish. And that's very subtle. I'll bring this down a little bit so you can see it. Let's turn this light on and see what this does. That's not too bad. It's actually better with it a little darker. The contrast is anyway. So I could even make these a little lighter. So this could actually be a little lighter, this purple. So I'm gonna add a little bit more white to the color on my palette. So this is where you're just kind of going at your own pace, paying attention to different details. I made this purple a little lighter. Ooh, there we go. I was just looking for a little more contrast, so a little bit more of the light on the dark. And I did a little bit of a rim on the underside of these mushrooms. And then if I want to get a little fancy, on one side of these mushrooms, I could add a line, a light purple line coming down to highlight one side of the stem. So if you have a small brush and you pick one side, you can do a little bit of outlining to bring those mushrooms to stand them out a little bit more. So this is me just doing wherever I have purple objects, I'm just adding a little bit of light purple as a secondary. So I just did a little bit of light purple dots up here on my light purple flowers, just to bring them to life a little bit. And I'll do a little bit of, I made the lighter purple a little lighter in color. So I'm just doing some extra dots. You could make these flowers a little more chunky, like a little bigger too. You could do these little light purple dots around some of the darker purple. Right? This is your painting. You can do anything you want here. See that? See how pretty that is? And then all these colors start to kind of tie together. But it's just using one color at a time and kind of bopping your way around your picture. And I love this. It's coming to life quite nicely. So I think I'm happy with my light purples. I'm going to keep it really simple for tonight. I'm not going to touch the purple on I have a little purple back wing on my butterfly. I'm going to keep that the way it is. I could use this light purple for my butterfly's body, which is just like a line on one side with like little antennas. So if you wanted to use your light purple to give your butterfly like a little body, you could. But I'm going to go back to these two mushrooms because there's some fun detail I want to do with the group with these two mushrooms. And then I need some green for my orange flowers down here too. So maybe I'll do the orange flowers, the green on these orange flowers first, and then we'll do the big mushrooms together. Some of you may have already done your big mushrooms. I know that Terry was working on hers already. So feel free to go at your own pace there. But I'm going to connect these little flowers to the earth. And this is where you can also decide if you have a lot of extra green space, you can add in more leaves and more vines like coming into this space. I am being mindful of like keeping some of the black space open. I tucked in some of these flowers to fill in some of this space, but everybody has always does things differently in these classes. So just look at your own picture and figure out, are you happy with the amount of white space, aka, the sky coming through, or do you feel like you need to add anything else anywhere else? Okay. So I just kind of connected these little orange flowers to the ground with just a little bit of greenery, and you can see it really just tied it all together. And as an artist tonight, I'm happy with my like simple bottom here. I just did some intertwining green lines just to kind of connect it on the bottom. So as you're looking at your colors, figure out and look at the bottom space here. Are you happy with how this bottom is connected? Do you need to add anything else here? So consider that as well. So I'm going to clean off my brush. I'm looking at this and I'm reflecting. I'm happy with my purples. I have orange everywhere I need to. If you need to add any second coats to your mushrooms, again, your choice. I'm going to do one more coat for my orange mushroom. God help me. Let's see here. Do I have enough paint? We often need to mix more paint along the way, don't we? That's all right. I'm just doing a quick second coat. I'm not using the thickest paints tonight, so I'm just doing a quick second coat. Some of you may not need this. But I just did a nice second coat for that mushroom there. I'm going to do a quick red second coat for my red mushroom because I'm doing white dots, white spots, white dots on these mushrooms, and I want the color to be nice and strong. So for me to be happier or more satisfied as an artist tonight, I'm being very thoughtful to make sure the base colors on some of my primary things are nice and solid. And for me, these mushrooms are pretty important. They're a primary object on my picture tonight. So I want to make sure they're red enough. I want to make sure they're orange enough. And I'm going to let that dry. All right. And if you need to take more time doing one thing or another, go for it. I have a red mushroom here, and this is a red flower. over here, I'm going to make this flower a little more red. So maybe just like we did with the purples, think about anywhere you might want to add a little more red to your picture. Right? If you have a red mushroom, where else could you add red to find a little balance? Maybe it's a little, maybe there's little red flowers like tucked in over here into this vine. You could do little, look at little tiny dot or here. Look at little red flowers tucked into this vine. You could do that, right? This is just thinking outside the box. You could do a couple of little red ones kind of tucked in. Maybe over here, like little berries. Anything goes. Like you can really just kind of create your own destiny with art. And that's one of the fun things is there's no formal rules on what you may or may not want something to be. You can bring in as much color as you wish. But look at that. How much fun. Kind of brings like a green picture to life by just adding in a touch of color here and there, right? Kind of fun way to think about it. So I'm going to let the red dry. We'll do some white spots on our mushrooms. My orange is now dry, so I'm going to use a small brush of choice to do some white spots on my orange mushroom. And your spots, they can be they don't have to be round. They could be ovals that have like little indents in them. They can be small. They could be big. They can be little tiny dots. I'm kind of going all over the place just to see what happens here. We'll make a little bit of a darker orange to kind of rim the underside of our mushroom here. The red one we'll do a little bit of a whiter underside, but this one here, I just did some kind of funky white dots and spots. And I'm going to take a little orange, and if I have any left here, let's see. And you can either use red or you can use, I might even bring in a little bit of blue. Just make a darker color of some kind. This is kind of like an orangey purple. And you're going to do a little bit of a darker line on the underside of this orange mushroom for a little shading. And you can do a little finger smudging. You can play with the shading on the underside of this mushroom. You can also use a little bit of black if you wanted to do a little bit of like a line, an outline on the underside. So I'm just using a thin brush. You can do a little bit of a line. We want a little shade on the bottom side of this mushroom. So you can play, blending is pretty tricky, as many of you know, but if you wanted to blend this up, maybe even the right side of this orange mushroom has a little bit of extra shading. I have a little bit of water and a little bit of black on my brush. It can be kind of scary, so I acknowledge if you don't want to do this part of adding a lot of extra shading, but this is just a way of at least do it on the bottom to add a little shading. But you can see how it gives it a little bit of dimension. I did a little bit of like a watery black line on the right side of this mushroom just to shade it. It's kind of just giving it a little bit of a gray tone on the edge, but you can see how it gives it a little bit of dimension by adding a little bit of the darker color. So it's a little bit of a level 2 step. Again, a little water. I did it along the bottom of the orange mushroom and along the right side. because the left side is going to be the brighter side of the mushroom. And you can even add a little bit of this darker orange to one side of the stem to add a little shading. So on the right side, maybe I'll add a line. Look at that, to add a little shading to the mushroom. So I did like a dark orange, a thin dark orange line on the right side of the mushroom stem. You can play with your water if you want to blend it in or not. This is where you can get a little fancy. You could use a paper towel to kind of manage some of this. For me, I still want the stem to be pretty light, so I'm just going to use, this is pretty watery. I'm going to use a paper towel just to kind of clean it up a little bit. There, but you can see how that's a nice, you can see the difference between the red, which is just a flat red color and a flat stem, versus adding some of the shaded properties of the orange. So you can play with that. We're doing good on time. We're at 8:30. We'll wrap this up in the next 10, 15 minutes at most. We're just going to do the red mushroom next. And then any final details that you want to add to it, we can. So my red mushroom is painted. I'm going to use the same details I just did for the orange mushroom on the red mushroom. We're going to add the spots and then we're going to add shading. So that's the lineup here. So I'm going to grab a little bit of white. And then we're going to do the underside of the red too. So let's do the underside of the red. So I'm going to grab a little bit of white. And we'll add a little bit of an underside brim of the red. So with your white paint on the underside, we're going to do a little bit, we're going to create a little bit of a lip. So we're going to give it a little bit of a lip here. And you're going to kind of outline the bottom side of the mushroom with white paint, and we're going to come in with a darker color. It's kind of like a hat brim a little bit. And then you can even bring the mushroom stem. We're going to extend it up into this area. Look at this. It's so cool. It's a little bit like of a three-dimensional piece. So I used white paint and I outlined the bottom of the mushroom, and then I kind of created a little pocket for the underside by doing a second white line on top. So I have this red gap in between. And then I moved the mushroom stem up and in to this underside of the cap, which was really fun. Okay. So it creates a little bit of a three-dimensional look there. We'll let that dry, and then we're going to add some shading. So while that little lip area and underside is drying, you can put in some spots, big or small. They could be abstract in form or perfectly round. You can pick and choose. I did some small ones and some big ones on the other mushroom. So I'm going to kind of keep it funky because, hey, why not? Some small ones, did some big ones. I'm just kind of doing it outside the box tonight. It's kind of letting go of expectations of what spots should look like on mushrooms, just to kind of be in the moment. Okay. My very funky spotted mushrooms. I'm gonna let that dry here for a minute. So again, there's this, I used white paint to a thin white line on the underside of the red mushroom. Then I did like a top kind of pocket line. And then I extended the mushroom up in between the middle. That's how I did that. And then I did some of the white spots. Now I'm gonna let my white spots dry. And I'll probably create a little bit of like a, you know how we did like a darker orange over here? Well, this is all drying. I may do a darker red to do the similar shaded contrast, just like we did down here. I'm gonna do the same thing up here. So we used the dark orange to do some outlining for shading. on the side of the mushroom and on the stem. So I'm gonna make a dark red. So a little bit of black right here and a little bit of red. Ooh, so fun. Take a minute to mix these colors. Use the right brush, use a small brush. And then on the right side of this red mushroom, you can use a dark red color. See, that's not dark enough. Make it a little darker. There we go. A little shade. And that's not even dark enough, but you can kind of see it. I'm going around my white spots. So you can kind of see some of the shaded principles. We're going to let the white dry pretty well here, but you can play with how dark you want your shade to be on the right side, the right side of this mushroom. You can start to see the difference right here. I might come down a little bit. Add a little bit of shading down here. Kind of dance around some of these spots if you want to. Right, this is shading. The moonlight is hitting the middle of these mushrooms straight down, and it's shaded over on the right over here. You can kind of start to see that come out. And I'm going to use this red, darker red color, and I'm going to do a line down the right side of this mushroom stem for a little bit of shaded contrast. This is where I can use a little tiny bit of water to kind of help blend it in just a little bit. I want the left side of this mushroom to be lighter and the right side of the stem just to be a little darker. So you can see how that transition is starting to happen. And I'm using just a little bit of paint, a little water on my brush, and I'm just gently kind of feathering this darker color over. And this is blending techniques. This takes a while to kind of figure out and learn, but just play with it. But the water's helping tremendously. Bring it a little closer so you can see it. It's not perfect, but it's kind of fun. It adds a little bit of that dimension. So I have a little shading. You can see the shading on this mushroom here. It's starting to dry right there. There is a little bit of black or darker red on the underside of this mushroom. Terry did a great job of doing that. So one of the things you can do is I'm mixing a dark red, dark red. You can do an outline. So you can do lines. So I'm going to do an outline here under the white. I'm doing a dark. You can do black or a dark red outline. So you can see I'm adding contrast to the underside of this mushroom. So I'm doing a dark outline on the underside of this top white lip. And then you can do vertical mushroom-like connection points kind of coming down. So like little lines coming down. You want to. It's up to you on how much work you want to do here. Lots of ways of doing it. You can bring these lines all the way down if you want on top of the white line. If you don't like the way that looks, you can just do a darker line down here, kind of like ground it. So you can play with the look and the feel here. There's a lot of different ways of doing this step. So you can either keep this white contrast or you could just make it darker. In the inspiration, it's a little darker, so you can kind of play with if you wanted to keep it lighter or darker in this space. So I kind of kept the white line on top, but I covered up some of the lighter line, and you can see how it adds shade on the more darkness on the underside. So that 3-dimension really just kind of brought all these objects to life quite a bit. We're doing great for time. We're at 8:38. If anyone has to leave soon, no problem. I might add a little bit of dark red watery bit to some of these mushroom spots as just like a little bit of a 3-dimension. Just going on the underside of some of these white dots, I'm just adding a little bit of shade. If you don't want to do that, you don't have to. I'm kind of experimenting a little bit there. I might do a little bit of that down here just to see what happens. If you don't like the way it looks, you don't have to. I'm not crazy about it, but I'm kind of using my finger to dab it off, and it kind of creates just enough of the shade that I was looking for. So I wouldn't do a ton of dark color on the underside of those spots. You could just leave it too. But I always love just thinking outside the box there. The only other thing I'll consider adding is that there's on the butterfly, there's like 2 little circles on the wings. On the top wing, there's a little circle, and then there's a little dot on the bottom wing. And if you wanted to add like a little bit of like a dimension to kind of separate these 2 wings, you could add like a little line in between. But besides that, everyone's kind of looking at, their white space where you have things displayed. I'm going to pull this up a little bit so everybody can see. But you're going to get to a point where you feel like you're like almost done. If you wanted to add more green detail, some lighter colors to your greens, some darker colors, some more, punchy greens versus lighter greens, dark greens, you can. Again, there's so much detail you could add to tonight's picture. But for anyone that's watching the recording, I want to thank you so much for listening in. If you have any questions or need any support to get you over the finish line, don't hesitate to chat me on Patreon, send me an email, all good. But I'll go ahead and pause the video.